Learning objectives. After completing this digital module, learners will be able to understand how the production function works in the production processes, learn how different input combinations as employed in the phases of production impact the quantity of the output, learn about the isoquant curve and their functions, learn about the long and short run production processes and the variable and fixed inputs as employed in the production. Learn about the total product, marginal product, and average product and their interrelations. Understand the law of diminishing marginal product and the law of variable proportions. Learn how the shapes of total, marginal, and average product curves look like and the reasons behind their shapes. Learn about the constant increasing and decreasing returns to scale. Learn about Cobb-Douglas production function and the relation between the employed inputs and the outputs. Learn about short-run average and marginal costs and their relation with the outputs. Learn about long-run average and marginal curves and their interrelations with the outputs. Production function and the concepts of long and short-run productions. Production functions. A firm uses the inputs in the time of production and gets the required output, which builds a relationship as called the production function. As the firm uses various quantities of inputs in the production, its intention is to get the maximum level of output to be produced out of that. By the aid of efficient use of the input, the maximum amount of output from a production process can be achieved. In the table of production function, where two factors of production are fixed, it can be shown how by the combination of two different factors, the output can be increased in multiplication of rows and columns. Isoquant curves. If two different inputs can generate the same amount of maximum possible level of output in the production phases, that set of inputs will be called isoquant with each other. Each isoquant represents the amount of the output by which it is recognized. The long and short run productions. In the long run process of the production, all of the inputs can be varied or changed in the phases of the production. So there is no limit of input in the production. Consequently, by the changes of inputs, the outputs are also varied in every phase, and the maximum possible level of the output does change according to the input increase as well. The long term does not depict the time, but one production is long term when its every input is variable input. In the short run process, one input is fixed and the other input is variable. In the short run process, firms find that one input only can be increased in order to get more output. Total, marginal, and average products and law of diminishing marginal products. Total, marginal, and average products. When one input is variable in a production process and other inputs are constant, then the relationship between the variable input and the output is called the total product of variable input. This is also called total return to or total physical product of the variable input. Marginal product of the input is the proportion of the change of the output in every unit by the change of the input when all other inputs are constant. In any level of production, the summation of the marginal products of every unit of that input shows the total product in that production level. In order to derive the average product, we need to calculate the average number of all marginal products up to that unit level. This is called the average return of the variable input as well. Law of diminishing marginal products. It shows that after a specific point, despite increasing one factor input, while others are kept fixed, the consequent increase in output in the level of the production will be ceased and it will start to decrease. At the time when it is seen that the variable input has been increased in such a quantity where the production process becomes so crowded, in that position, the output will not get the proper chances to grow while other inputs have been kept unchanged from the beginning. Law of variable proportions in marginal products. This law shows the same like the law of diminishing returns by pointing the marginal product of variable input, which after a point of employment starts to fall. Shapes of total, marginal, and average products curves and returns to scale. Shapes of total, marginal, and average products. The total product curves are positively sloped as we know that the output increases as long as the variable input increases. The marginal product curves are also shown as increasing initially, but as per the law of variable proportions, we can see them to decrease after a point when by the increasing of the variable input, the marginal product can't be increased further. Thus, after a point they start to decline. The marginal product curves are shown like upside down U or V shapes. The average curve shapes also like inverse U, but it takes more time to decline than the marginal product curves. We know that average product curve shows the average of the marginal products in every unit, so they must be lesser than the marginal products. When marginal products are going to decline, then also they becomes higher than the average points. Thus, the average curve continues to rise despite of the marginal curve's decline. After a point when marginal curve goes down, a significant decline, it starts to reduce its corresponding average points. The average curve cuts the marginal curve at its maximum point, after which it starts to decline. But after some time, the marginal curve starts to decline, returns to scale. When every input of the production phase is variable, the output also increases. When we see the increment in proportion same as the increase in inputs, it is said the constant returns to scale. In the increasing return to scale, the output increases more than the input employment proportion. In the decreasing return, the opposite happens. Short run and long run costs. Total costs, average costs, and short run costs. For every level of output, firm chooses the least possible cost input employment. The cost function shows the relationship between the cost and output. The entire cost that the firm arranges to engage the fixed inputs is called total fixed cost. In the same way, we can get total variable cost too. The average fixed and variable costs can be achieved total fixed and variable costs by single unit of outputs. The short-run average costs are the total of average fixed and variable costs. Like marginal product, the marginal cost is dependent on total variable cost in the production. The short-run marginal cost is calculated from the ratio between change in total cost and change in output. Shapes of short-run cost curves. Total fixed cost, TFC, is horizontal to x-axis. When variable cost, TVC, is added, it goes upward. In average fixed cost, AFC, it shows like a rectangular hyperbola where the TFC can be seen in a shape of rectangle. Short average cost is the total of AFC and AVC, and both of these average costs initially fall till some level of output, production. When they start to rise, AFC remains greater than AVC, so still then SAC remains to decrease. When being pointed to opposite directions, the AVC starts to recede, AFC. SAC initiates to increase. It is thus a U-shaped curve. The long-run cost and the shapes of the long-run cost curves. The long-run average cost, LRAC, is calculated by dividing the total cost by the single unit of the output, and long-run marginal cost is similar to the changes in the total cost per every unit change in the output of the production process. The LRMC curve is a U-shaped and it crosses the LRAC curve at the minimum point of LRAC. It initially starts to fall due to the relation between marginal and average cost. Summary. Let us summarize what we have learned. The production function shows the maximum quantity of produced output in different set of combinations of inputs. Short-run production shows some inputs to be varied, while in long run, every inputs can be varied or changed. Total product is the relationship between a variable input and output when all other inputs are held constant. For any level of employment of an input, the sum of marginal products of every unit of that input up to that level gives the total product of that input at that employment level. Both the marginal product and the average production curves are inverse U-shaped. At the maximum point of average product curve, the marginal product curve cuts the average product curve. In order to produce output, the firm chooses least cost input combinations. Total cost is the sum of total variable cost and the total fixed cost, and the average cost is the sum of average variable and fixed cost. The average fixed cost curve is downward sloping. Short-run marginal cost, average variable cost, and short-run average cost curves are U-shaped. The short marginal curve cuts the AVC curve from below at the minimum point of AVC. SMC curve cuts the SAC curve from below at the minimum point of SAC. In the short run, for any level of output, sum of marginal costs up to that level gives us a total variable cost. The area under the SMC curve up to any level of output gives us the total variable cost up to that level. Both the long run average and marginal curves are U-shaped. The